Today's video is going to be about how to service your Supra like a pro. We've got a vehicle in at the moment that's having a service. I'm going to give you a quick look around the vehicle because this one is absolutely mint. It even smells like a new car when you get in the vehicle. So let's have a quick look inside. It's got the Recaro confetti seats. You can see in the door shut here, it's absolutely pristine. This car inside and out is a fine example of a Mark IV Supra, so I'm very pleased to be working on this one. I've had a quick look around the vehicle already and it is absolutely in pristine condition. So I'm going to take my time and I'm going to show you how to service them correctly, and it's offering MOT as well, so we're going to be doing pretty much everything, a full MOT inspection as well. So here we are, the bonnet's open, let's get straight to it. So I've already checked the air filter and it's got a K&N panel filter in it that's absolutely pristinely clean as well, so I'm just going to blow that out, give that another coat of oil. I need to check the brake fluid moisture content, the clutch fluid moisture content, make sure the power steering's good. We're going to do an engine and oil filter on this. We'll check the coolant content as well, make sure that's good, top up the washer fluid. So yeah, we're going to get straight to it and crack on. Brake fluid's okay, so that is showing less than 1% of moisture in this and it is on okay. So straight away we're going to change the clutch fluid because that is showing over 4% moisture content. So now we're going to do the antifreeze content. 1, 2, 3, 3, and the fourth one's just sinking. So this antifreeze in this car is down to -18 degrees. So I'm happy with that. So the air filter's now cleaned and oiled. I can put the cover back over the airbox. The filter's installed and I can tick that off the list. Be careful not to break the little clips that hold the airbox together. These are getting harder and harder to acquire now. Also, whilst you're in the engine bay, you need to inspect and make sure you've got no leaks anywhere, any signs that it's wet, especially around the power steering pump as well, where the O-rings can normally go. Make sure the power steering tank's good and just give it a good inspection all the way round. The other thing you need to look at as well is cam cover seals and any oil that's going to be around on the bottom of the engine. So far, this one all looks dry. I recommend you getting a squeezy bottle for doing any service work. This allows us to remove any of the fluids out of the reservoirs whilst keeping it nice and tidy. It's the easiest way to do it. Now that's done, I can fill the reservoir back up with fresh fluid and then we can pump through the clutch slave cylinder, making sure that it's all nice new fluid that is in the clutch system. Brake fluid's very corrosive, so make sure you don't get any on the paint or anything that you don't want to corrode basically. We'll put the lid on for now. Next one's going to be power steering fluid. So the vehicle is cold and the hydraulic system is cold at the moment, so we need to make sure that it's filled up to the cold mark on the power steering. So I can tell straight away this fluid is fairly old. It's got like a brown tinge to it and it should be Dextron 3 power steering fluid. So it should be nice bright red. So I'm going to drain this reservoir and refill the reservoir as well. Now we've almost done the stuff underneath the engine bay. I'm just going to check the tread depths on all 4 tyres and record the information. We've got a digital micrometer to measure the tread depths and I'm just going to show you that now. This is really just to make sure that the tread depths are all good for its MOT. Use it in 3 places across the tyre. Minimum tread depth is 1.6 mil. We've got 6.4 mil, 7.1 mil, 6.6 mil, 6.07 mil, 7.01 mil, and 5.7 mil. 6.3, 6.5, and 7. 6.6, 6.2. I could easily tell that these tyres were absolutely pristine condition just because of the state of the car as well. The car is absolutely perfect. Whilst I was checking the tyre depths and making sure they were all good, I was inspecting the discs and the pads. So this car has got almost brand new discs and brand new pads in it. I highly recommend, if you've got a car that's got 100,000 miles on it, you measure the thickness of the disc and you check the inside of the pad on the caliper. Normally the insides will wear slightly worse than the outside pad, so we'll check the discs, make sure they're all good. We'll check the pads, make sure they're all good. This car, there's no lips on any of the discs on this vehicle. No lips on the inside or the outside on the rear. I say the calipers look like almost like brand new. Same with the front. Again, no lips whatsoever on these discs. These look like brand new discs. And again, we'll check the pad material. But as I say, 100,000 mile car, you want to make sure that you have got decent thickness on the discs, otherwise it'll cause brake judder and all sorts of stuff. Going under the car, we're going to make sure that we've got no leaks from the gearbox shifter seal, the rear main seal of the engine, the front main seal of the engine, any of the diff seals, and we're going to then start doing our fluid checks and make sure that all of the fluids are changed in accordance to Toyota, and we're going to crack on with that right now. Start at the back and we'll check that there's no oil or leaks from anywhere of these output shafts on the diff, and you'll be able to tell if they're wet at all. These are totally dry. We'll check the front seal as well on the diff, and again this is totally dry. So we've got to do diff oil change on this as well, so we'll do that shortly. Whilst we're under here, we'll just inspect any of the bushes, any of the alignment bolts, and check the general condition of the car. So far this one has been undersealed at some point, so it is in very, very good condition. We have no rust at all on any of the seals anywhere. The exhaust looks good. It's got all new fixings and bolts and stuff on it. All of the lines as well, these are starting to perish and corrode quite badly. So brake lines is quite important. So we need to make sure that the brake lines, fuel lines, return lines, charcoal canister lines are not corroded, especially as the water sits in these plastic covers. But I can tell straight away this one is looking good. You can see inside here as well, there's no corrosion. If this normally fills up with a lot of salt and road dirt, that is when the corrosion will start to happen. So we've checked the diff, we know we've got no leaks, so we're good to do an oil change on the diff. We'll go to the gearbox. V160s, V161s, 99% of them will have a shifter seal issue. So you can tell if it's wet at all up where the shifter linkage is, then it is likely going to need a shifter seal. This one looks okay. I can't see any wet fluid anywhere up there. And it normally starts to drip down here and you get some residue of oil, which is, this is starting to show a little bit of fluid down here, and it looks like it's coming from the rear gearbox seal. So this could be due for a refresh on the gearbox. I'm not sure how many miles this box has done or when it was last refurbished, but it may be original, and that means that the seals are starting to go a little bit hard. Also, whilst we're here and checking, we can check the shifter bushes as well and make sure they haven't fallen to bits, because that's another common issue with the Supra. If you get a really baggy gear change feel, then you can check the bushes. So that looks okay at the moment. It's not split or perished. Same with this one as well. So them shifter seals are quite good. Then we'll check, make sure we've got no leaks from this hole here, which would be the rear main seal, and that looks fairly dry as well. So that all looks promising. So we also need to change the fuel filter as well on this vehicle. So we'll do a fuel filter change, and the oil filter is located up there. So we need to remove the under tray, get that out of the way, and then we can do an oil filter change on this as well. So now the under tray is off, we can see if it's had any telltale signs of any oil leaks. And so far this is all dry. You'll normally have an oily patch here for front main seal or cam seals are on their way out. So far this tray is dry. So we can put that aside, and then we can start checking front main seal. Right up here, there's no residue of oil here. We'll check the power steering lines, make sure they're good. We've got a bit of corrosion starting to happen on this power steering line here, but nothing to worry about, just needs a bit of a clean, and that'll be fine. Make sure there's no perished power steering lines anywhere else. It looks like, okay, so we've got a little bit of oil on this boot, on this power steering rack, and you can starting to show signs of maybe a weep at some point. So, in the near future, this may need a rack rebuild and new seals put internally in the rack on both ends, and that will stop any of this oil making its way out the steering rack. But at the moment, I've got no drips at all, just showing a little bit of greasiness around there. The oil filter is located up on the side of the engine. And we're going to go and do an oil change now, and then drop the gearbox oil and diff oil. But yeah, we're just having a good inspection, making sure everything is how it should be. Check the radiator, make sure the cores are all clear, make sure there's no corrosion or any weeps of any coolant anywhere. And so far this car is passing all of them tests. Right, so I'm going to get to it, and I'm going to do an oil change on this car. I'm going to do a quick oil change on this car. I'm going to grab a sample of the oil, and then I'm going to grab the first bit that comes out. I do this in all of my servicing just to see what the oil condition is. You can normally tell with the torch how shiny it is, but anyway, I'm going to try and grab a little sample as it comes out and then drain the rest. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Sample. And I'm going to let this drain. Once this is drained, I'll put a new sump plug washer and torque the sump plug up on the market, and then I will go to the oil filter. New sump plug washer to go back on. So whilst I was doing this oil change, I thought I will check the engine mounts on this vehicle as well. So this has got facelift engine mounts on it, and looking at the engine mounts, they're fully compressed up. So this will have quite a bit of engine vibration. So I'm going to recommend that at some point these engine mounts get changed for a brand new set of engine mounts, and it will stop any vibrations. You can normally tell when they're pretty dead because they kind of touch and they shouldn't touch anymore. If I was to show you a good engine mount and a bad engine mount, you'll see straight away what I mean. So this is what I mean with the engine mounts. So if you look where my screwdriver is, there's a part here on the engine mount which shouldn't touch this part here. So there should be a gap in between, and you can see there is no gap between here. So they have fully compressed up. So yeah, this is going to need some engine mounts as well at some point. That's my oil filter wrench on the oil filter. They are a little bit tricky to get to, so I'm going to crack on with that now. I can't hold the camera and do it at the same time, but I will show you what I do after I've removed the oil filter, only because the oil filter itself is located quite far up on the engine, and there will be some residue of oil that gets kind of spilt onto the subframe and the engine mount, and then we'll make sure we clean all of that off before it goes back to the customer after we've done our oil change. What I mean about once you remove the oil filter, you're left with some residue on the subframe and across the engine mount. So I know Once this car goes back to the customer, he can park it on his drive or in his garage, and there'll be no spots of oil on the floor underneath it when he removes it out. A genuine Toyota Lexus oil filter, part numbers 90915-YZZJ4. This is the larger of the filters that you can put on Supra. If you've got a sandwich plate on, you can get a slightly smaller oil filter that allows you to fit on the chassis rail. We're going to remove this, we're going to prime the oil filter to about 2/3 of the way up. With the fresh Miller's 1040 oil, because this is a standard engine, and then we're going to put the oil filter back on. When the oil filter up, just take your time. It takes some time for the oil filter paper to absorb the oil, so just take your time with it, and I'm going to be filling it up, say about 2/3 of the way up. The only reason I do that is because the oil filter's at an angle, and I don't want it to leak out when I put it back on the engine. Start this oil filter prime now, and it is ready to be fitted. So you can see just the level of the oil internally on the oil filter itself, and yep, that is ready to go on. The O-ring has already been greased by Toyota, so there's no need to put any oil on the O-ring on a Toyota filter. Spirit gun, I'm now going to fill it up with brake cleaner, and I'm going to clean all the old residue of that oil that's been spilt on the subframe to make sure the underside of this car is perfectly clean before it leaves. Last thing to do is just to dry off the area that you've cleaned and blasted, make sure it's totally dry. And there you have it, all totally dry, no more oil residue on any of it. And yeah, I can be assured there's not going to be any spots on the underside of the car when he parks this in his garage. It's going to be Gearbox Oil, so it's using genuine Toyota V160 gear oil for this. We do hold this in stock, but it's getting harder to get hold of. And yeah, it's like 1.8 litres. So I'm going to drain the gearbox, and then I'm going to PTFE the sump plug, and then fill it up with its fresh gearbox oil. 17mm on the sump plug for the gearbox oil. Sometimes these can be grollied up really tight. This is a tapered thread, so if you do these up too tight, you do run the risk of cracking the casing, but if you do them up too loose, you run the risk of having a leak. So I always PTFE this sump plug with some liquid PTFE, and let's just pull this out and have a look at the condition of the oil that's in here straight away, see how black and burnt it is, or see if it's good. This is a precaution anyway, but this oil still looks like it's got good life in it. You can smell sometimes when it's burnt and black, but it smells okay. So we'll finish draining this. We'll wire wool the threads on this sump plug to make sure there's no grip or anything in it. It's been PTFE'd in the past, but we'll put some fresh PTFE on this and then put it back in. Here I am just filling up this gearbox oil. I've got another little squeezy bottle, and yeah, we can just make sure that's fully seated. We can just get it in the side and just, yeah, begin filling this gearbox up. They're a bit tight to get anything bigger than the kind of squeezy bottles to fill the gearbox oil up. So this is my technique, and minimum mess. So this gearbox has now had its 1.8 litres of oil, and as you can see, it is just started to run down and drip. I'm just going to wait until the last drip, and then I will PTFE again this sump plug and put this back in. I need to find the torque specs actually, because I can't remember what this one is, and I want to make sure that it is torqued up. So now that's the gearbox oil done on this, I still need to clean the gearbox, again get this residue of oil off, so I'm going to do the same things what I did at the front and blast all the gearbox, make sure it's totally clean, and then if I go for a test drive and come back, I can see if there's any residue. Sometimes they leak on the centre casing as well. The Get Trag boxes have a tendency to do that, so yeah, we'll make sure but when it comes back, I know it's clean when I go, come back, double check, make sure it's still clean when it leaves. So whilst I'm underneath the car as well, I can also check the auxiliary belt. Now, the easiest thing to do with this one is just to rotate the auxiliary belt around so you can see it and see if you've got any cracks or anything like that. If you do have a perished belt, just change it instantly. There's no point messing around, just get a new one and fit it. It's fairly easy to do, and then you won't break down on the side of the road, because that auxiliary belt does drive the alternator, the water pump, the power steering, and yeah, so definitely worth changing if there's any perished, signs of perishing on the belt. The gearbox is lovely and dry now, and we can take it out for a test drive once we've finished the service, and then come back and see if we've got any weeps from anything, because this is all totally dry now, 100% dry. So carry on. Now we're going to go and move back to the diff and do a diff oil change, and it's 1.5 litres in the diff. It's a 10mm Allen key for the drain plug and the fuel plug. Undo it and let it drain out. 75/90 in this diff, so it's 1.5 litres of 75/90. The diff drain plug has a magnet on it, so you can inspect and see how much warp is on the magnet. There's not much on this one, and we're going to be fitting new crush washers as well, both on the drain and the fill. So I'm pretty lucky here. I'm just filling this diff oil up now, and we've got this pump up system. So you can just pressurise this canister and it will feed all the way up here into the diff oil. So yeah, otherwise it's quite difficult to actually start filling this with a bottle or anything. But breakable system keeps it very clean when you're working on the vehicles. So I've just come to torque the fill and drain plugs on the diff, and for everybody out there, it's 36 foot-pounds. Just torquing up the sump plug on the gearbox, and you have, because it's a tapered fitting on this sump plug, you have to do it by feel. There is actually no torque spec. I've got the Toyota book out, but what feels right to me is about 45 foot-pounds. If you look on the Toyota box, on the manual it says fuel transmission with oil, and there is no torque spec for that plug bolt. As I say, anything that gets torqued up will get a pen mark. So that's all of them done. Just a sump. That's the sump done. I've still got the fuel filter to change, and I'm going to show you what to do with that now. So we're going to do a fuel filter change now. You might find this silly, but the first thing I do is disconnect the battery. Now the battery's disconnected, I'm going to go into the boot. So here I am in the boot. I'm going to remove the spare wheel. I've already removed the boot floor. Just look how clean the inside of this car is. It's got all its foam, all its jack. Has it got the toolkit as well? Yeah, it's got most of it. It's got all its poppers, clips. It's not been, yeah, it's got everything like a factory. I'll just put the camera down whilst I remove the spare wheel. Now the spare wheel's out, I'm going to take the inspection cover off on the fuel tank hanger. going to crack off this 17mm banjo because this is the feed for the fuel filter. If you don't crack this off here, when you take the filter out, it ends up putting a vacuum and it ends up just forever coming out. So take this fuel fitting off, and the reason why I've disconnected the battery is because if anybody was to get in the car and put the ignition on, it would piss out fuel everywhere. So now I'm going to do this 17mm fuel fitting. That's the fuel fitting now cracked off. It's got 2 crush washers on it as well, so we'll replace them when we put the fuel fitting back on again. Now I'm going to go underneath the car and remove this fuel filter. When I'm doing the fuel filter, it's a 14mm and a 19mm, and you need to hold the fuel filter with the 19 and then undo this 14mm here. These are normally bloody tight and they take quite a while to undo, so I'm not going to get it on video. I'm just going to crack on and do it. So new fuel filter assembly, and again 2 new crush washers. This is for the banjo bolt that is on the feed side up to the rail, and then we have a tapered swaged fitting on this end which is normally tight, which I've already undone. So I'm going to swap this over now. So that's a fuel filter now fitted, and remember, make sure you mop up any old residue of any fuel. Once I've finished all this service on this car, I'll be firing it up and inspecting the underside of the vehicle, make sure there's no leaks. So before this car goes off for its MOT, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we do a full light check on this car. So Lee, can you put the side lights on? Boss is in the car. 2 side lights, both sides. Make sure both number plate lights are working. Okay, brake lights. Both brake lights, centre LED light, and the other side brake light. Okay, reverse. So we've got 1 reverse light here. Is it going to have 1 or 2?
Fog light.
Can you see you can switch this fog light on as well? There we go, there we've got the extra fog light. Okay, it's a little bit white, this fog light, but it is passable at the moment. It's not as bad as some of what I've seen. Okay, take it out, reverse, and fog light off. Indicator left, indicator right. Side lights on both sides of the vehicle as well for the reflectors. They're both working. So we go right onto the front. Say hello, boss. Oh. Again, side light, indicator left. Good, it's not white at all. Indicator right. Okay, do indicators off and do headlights. Got both headlights. We'll check that it hasn't got an LED in it. Nope, these are on HB4s. And do main beam. Again, both of them working. And front fogs. And front fogs. Also, just do the indicator right again. The indicator left. So that's this light check all done. I'm confident that all the lights are good, and that's pretty much about it. I've still got to jack the vehicle up, redo the tyre pressures with nitrogen, and I will check for any play in the front and the rear axles. So now I've got the car jacked up and the rear axles off the ground, I can check for any play. Sometimes you find top arms on Supras will have a bit of play, and also wheel bearings. So I'm going to check both sides of the car. I'm also going to deflate the tyres and fill them with nitrogen. So we're listening for any grumbling or any noise from the rear wheel bearings. So far I can only hear the disc and the pads working together. Anyway, I'm going to put the camera down, check both sides, and I'm going to do the front. So far, this car's perfect. No playing any of the arm, ball joints, bushes or anything like that. Also, wheel bearings are fine. So what we're going to do now is let the car back down and put it on the jack on the front of the vehicle. Now the front axle's off the ground. I've double checked the play in both front wheels, checked the front wheel bearings. Everything's perfect on this car. I've deflated the tyres again, filled them up with nitrogen, 34 psi. Yeah, just double check, make sure the front wheel bearings are good. Again, no grumbling, rumbling or anything like that. Go around the other side. Again, they sound absolutely perfect. Also turning the wheel full lock left, full lock right, make sure there's no playing any of the steering geometry or any of the steering knuckles or anything like that. So far this car's passed all the tests. Now we're in this really fine example of Mark IV Supra. I want to check all the lights and make sure all the lights on the dashboard are working correctly. A lot of the times now we're finding dry soldered joints on some of the PCBs. So let's check all the lights. Airbag light, seatbelt light, doors open, battery for alternator and catalytic converter, temperature sensor, snow light, traction control light, slip control light and side lights. They are all working so far. I'll cycle them one more time. This side is the one that normally go. We've got oil level sensor, oil pressure and engine ECU. So they all come on and work as they should. So now I'm just going to start the car, make sure all the lights cycle and go off like they should do. No errors, the only light that's staying on is the seatbelt light, and I'm just going to make sure that the seatbelts are all correct and working as well. So I put my seatbelt on and the light's gone out. I do need to check the rear seatbelts and the passenger seatbelt fully retract as well by themselves, because otherwise that is an MOT failure. So that's this service pretty much complete now. I've checked the entire vehicle over before it goes off for an MOT. Also, I've just checked the mileage, 51,814 miles, genuine miles. This car is probably one of the cleanest Mark IV Supras I've come across in the last 5 years.